The mysterious group, known simply as the Hunters, are one of the few enemies that the Division have encountered so far that have the ability to intimidate and overpower the highly trained agents. They move and fight in an almost identical way to the operatives of the SHD, but they have one major difference. Rather than fighting for the community and restoring order from those who wish to harm it, their sole purpose seems to be to hunt down the Division agents and slaughter them in a brutal, merciless fashion. Continuing on from a video released almost 12 months ago, I wanted to revisit the Hunters based on the new information that could be found in the Division 2. I use the word information very loosely, because at this stage we still haven't actually been given any lore on these guys. So before I get into anything, I want to state that this video, much like the last, is going to be based on theory, or hypothesis if you really want to get technical about it. These theories will be based on other lore within the Division, and how they've been introduced alongside the main story, and the way they look and act in-game. There are hundreds of ideas and speculation out there, but I'm only going to cover the main ones that come up, the ones that have some good points behind them. I'll try to look into the pros and cons of each, and then add my own take to each theory. Firstly, when it comes to the Division 1, there are a couple of Hunter instances that I'll write off as simply non-canon, non-story related content. With the legendary missions, they can be seen fighting alongside the main factions, and this is also present in the resistance mode of the game. Hunters were obviously introduced to these activities to add another layer of difficulty later on in the game. In saying that, it's possible that the Hunters were only added to the game as a new challenging foe to battle it out against, with no backstory. But that wouldn't make much of a video now, would it? Here I like to speculate on the what-ifs, and how things could be affected based on certain outcomes. As we all know, Aaron Keener ended up escaping New York City, along with Gordon Amherst's protein printer and Russian scientist Vitaly Tynenko. He effectively has everything he needs to recreate the virus. During survival, apart from escaping the city before dying from their injuries, agents were also tasked with retrieving antivirals from the Dark Zone, and this is when we're first introduced to the Hunters. Keener has plans to remake the virus, possibly even more deadly than it was before. The last thing he wants is for the second wave agents to get their hands on these antivirals, assisting in the creation of a cure, removing any leverage he currently has. Keener has some of his top rogue agents trained up into these new Division hunting machines. Their task, to kill all Division agents on sight. This is probably one of the most popular theories out in the community. Aaron Keener was the main antagonist in the Division 1. Naturally, you'd expect any new and dangerous hostiles to have been related to him in some sort of way. But there are a few things that just don't seem to work with this idea. We need to remember that between the time that the agents went rogue and the survival update that brought up the Hunters, not a lot of time has passed in game. There wouldn't have been enough time to train up these new top rogue agents into the new second wave killing machines. We've all found first wave agents before. They can be seen roaming around New York City with squads of LMB. Although tough opponents, they certainly aren't to the same caliber of the Hunters. On top of this, the Hunters have examples of SHD tech that is superior to what the first or second wave have been running. For example, their jammers. Where did this come from? And how would it be manufactured in this short period of time within the Dark Zone? Shortly after Aaron Keener turned rogue and started recruiting other first wave agents into his cause, killing anyone that refused, the word got out. Agents unwilling to side with Keener went into hiding and cut all communications with the SHD and other agents as a way to stop themselves from being hunted down. They're trapped in the Dark Zone and have no idea who they can trust. The JTF and the government pulled out, and anyone left behind was a potential hostile. Because they cut communications with the SHD, they have no idea about the second wave agents being released. For this reason, they treat all agents they come across as the same, part of Keener's crew. They're still good people and don't harm civilians. They're just fighting for their own survival. The reason for showing up during the storm was because of a couple of reasons. One, they were able to conceal themselves relatively easily, to strike when they were ready. And two, they could see that the agents were wounded. The brutality at which they fight is just an act of revenge for these agents. Revenge for Keener and his rogues' betrayal of the community that they all lived in, the SHD and the government. I kind of like the idea of this one. Agents stuck in the Dark Zone, alone, being hunted down by their former colleagues. It sounds like the start of an action film. I find myself swaying more towards this one than the last, mainly because they're alone. they're having to fend for themselves. Very quickly they're likely to hone in on some of their skills, and the ones that don't are quickly found and killed. So the ones that are left are the toughest of the bunch. But this still doesn't explain the different SHD tech and where it came from. Also, it doesn't really tell us why they've travelled to Washington DC. Perhaps they're in too deep. Maybe they heard the distress call and decided to rejoin the fight as a faction of their own. The Black Tusk has been working in the shadows since long before the Division agents knew of their existence. In fact, only a short period of time after the outbreak, they were employed by an unknown organisation to start preparing an invasion on the US Capitol, while security forces had been brought to their knees combating the spread of the virus. The Black Tusk has a long history of working with shadowy portions of the government, and have been involved in handling conflict zones across the world, with their primary directives to be to cleanse, pacify, and police the emerging New America. The Black Tusk are well aware of the Division, and have been watching them since they were activated. As they were needing to keep their identity hidden until they were ready to show their hand, they sent in a special ops unit known only as the Hunters. The Black Tusk have been employed by an organisation with ties deep inside the US government. For this reason they are well aware of the SHD and how to combat them. The Hunters have been specially trained to take down Division agents. The reason for their involvement early on was to stop second wave agents from achieving their goal, to allow the green poison to continue to spread and to keep the security forces of the US busy. This idea has been gaining traction since the endgame of the Division 2 was first opened up to the community. The Black Tusk has very similar technology to the SHD, so they're more than capable of equipping a hunter with the type of skills they've been known to use. They're also quite well versed at working in the shadows, an attribute that the hunters have well mastered. This would also explain their need to conceal their identity using masks. The only thing that doesn't sit with me quite right is the hunters' behaviour in DC. It's possible they were brought into the capital to assist in taking down Division agents, but the Black Tusk special unit didn't seem to be having any troubles doing that on their own. In DC they just seem to be a little less motivated. It's like they were wandering around aimlessly, unsure of what to do. Maybe they were stood down after the BTS commander ordered a stop to the killing of Division agents. But why does the first one we come across kill Agent Edwards and then leave us alive after knocking us into a shocked paralysis type state? Although there is far more to the story, I can easily see this being a possibility as to what the hunters are, though I do feel this would be quite an anticlimactic end to this mystery. Russian personnel quickly evacuated New York City after the outbreak. However, somehow Vitaly Tynenko was left behind. Vitaly contacted the Russian government and offered his knowledge on the green poison for an extraction out of the city. The Russian government decided to help, not just to bring Vitaly back, but also to secure their servers in the basement of the Russian consulate. Because of the quarantine and the lockdown of the island, they had to send in a force of specially trained units to sneak in, the Spetsnaz. But before they got there, Kina's rogues had broken in and taken Vitaly hostage. The Russian unit hunted down all Division agents in an attempt to find information on Aaron Kina. The hunters use SHD tech and weapons that they have stolen from agents they've killed. The SHD tech is the most powerful thing that the agents have at their disposal, but it would also raise the question as to who they actually are. Same with the weapons and the face masks, and the fact that they don't ever talk. It's all about concealing their identity. The last thing they want to do is to start the next world war. They hold on to the watches of the agents they've killed as a way of listening out for communications and tracking agents, in hopes that they'll hear something about Kina. This theory has been around as long as the hunters. In my last video I dismissed this relatively quickly. One reason was because the evidence and ideas for this theory were pretty weak. Mostly it was based around them only using Russian weapons, of which we know isn't true, and a loosely strung together story around the Russian government wanting to take advantage of the US city of New York while it was crippled by the dollar flu. And the other reason? It just felt way too cliché. I think I just really didn't want the story of the hunters to go down that typical path of every action film of the 90s, of just blaming it on the Russians. But 12 months have passed, and a few members of the community, like Iron Vigilance, have helped clarify this theory further. I would have pointed out the fact that the hunters use SHD tech, and only members of the SHD have access and the ability to use it. But we now know this isn't true. We can even see an agent handing over his watch to a civilian in one of the pre-release trailers. We know that the virus is worldwide, but there are a number of recordings and intel in the Division 2 that show the majority of the impact that has been caused by the virus so far has been isolated to the United States. Furthermore, they have a good reason for being in DC. Using the SHD tech, the hunters, like the rest of the Division agents, found out that Aaron Kina has moved into Washington DC, This is why the hunters can be seen throughout the city, watching from the rooftops. They're continuing their search for Kina and Tanenko. But like every other theory, there are still a number of questions and things that still don't quite make sense. The overall way that the hunters act in the Division 2 has shifted dramatically. Given that their overall goal hasn't changed, shouldn't they still be trying to hunt Division agents down as ferociously and brutally as before? In the Division 2, it's like they'd rather not get into combat with us at all. They fight back when we engage them, but it's not so uncommon to see them moving away from us during these battles. It feels like we're the ones calling the shots now, and they're just simply trying to defend themselves. But even with these questions, I would go as far to say that this is probably one of the most robust hunter theories out there at the moment. Plus, this certainly wouldn't be the first time that a Tom Clancy game has brought Russia into the story. As a title holding the Tom Clancy name, there are a number of other games that have very similar groups to the Hunters. Boudark is a Russian Spetsnaz unit that was comparable to the Ghosts in Ghost Recon. Highly trained and disciplined, their name comes from the myth of men that choose to become wolves. First seen in Ghost Recon Alpha and then Future Soldier, their logo shows a very close resemblance to the Hunter logo. Like the Hunters are Russian Special Forces theory, the Boudark have been deployed to hunt down Kina, killing any agents they come across in hopes of finding information. The Ghosts are an elite special mission unit within the United States Army. Armed with state-of-the-art weapon systems and trained in the best field and combat tactics, they are the most specialized operation unit the Joint Special Operations Command has to offer. They're experienced with striking enemies swiftly, silently, and invisibly, making them the perfect counter to the SHD agents. This idea is a bit of a roll-on from the Russian theory, but also includes other characters shown in Tom Clancy titles, like the Ghosts from Ghost Recon. My knowledge on other Tom Clancy games is pretty good, but I still don't think it was quite good enough to be able to fully answer this theory, not to the extent that I'd like to. So I enlisted the help of a local expert on Tom Clancy lore. Dranius has been a member of our community for probably the last year or so, and is fairly active on our Discord. He is my go-to guy for information and advice on Tom Clancy lore outside of the Division. When I first came to him with this, he responded with a massive amount of detail on crossovers between most of, if not all, Tom Clancy games. I mean, I could probably take this information and make another half dozen videos on this topic alone. So rather than spending the next 30 minutes going over some of the information, I'm simply going to sum it up with, The Division is a standalone game in its own Tom Clancy universe, separate from the other games. Right back before the release of the first game, I actually recall a podcast where the developers confirmed this. The reason the Division was given the Tom Clancy name was because of the heavily story-driven and more realistic nature of this franchise. But even without hearing that, the timelines of the various games just don't really match up, especially given the worldwide epidemic that has occurred in the Division. There are many strong connections between games like Ghost Recon, Rainbow Six, Splinter Cell, and Hawks. These games make a point to show the connection, leaving nothing to chance. The closest we've found with the Division is with the recording collectibles that can be found in Wildlands, right before the Division 2 was released. But this was very obviously a promotions and marketing ploy from the team at Ubisoft. They've done this a number of times with other games, and it's actually quite a clever way of marketing upcoming titles, but it certainly didn't alter the story in any way for either game. Now, I'm not saying they won't change their minds and join some of these games in the future, but there certainly is nothing showing that they're considering it right now. But let's say that these games are connected. The characters suggested still don't quite fit in with their own background. Ghosts are specialist units, trained to operate in a team. Each have different positions and roles within the group. Yes, they're more than capable of operating on their own, but this is not what they're trained to do. Secondly, as their name suggests, they get in and out as fast as possible, and leave no trace behind. They kill if they have to, but they're trained to do it quickly and quietly. Given the way that the Hunters are looking for our agents, and the messy way they choose to finish this off, it really doesn't fit in with the Ghost Recon character. The idea behind Boudark is that they were the ones being sent in by the Russian government. Their main appearance was in Ghost Recon Future Soldier. Yes, they're a Russian Special Forces unit, similar to the Ghosts, but many, if not all of them, actually align themselves with the Russian separatist group, Raven Rock. Raven Rock went on to successfully take over the Russian government, but it's unlikely they would have deployed overseas, because they actually ended up losing the government position later on. The first wave agents were deployed into New York City shortly after the Dollar Flu was released into the world. They were there to support the JTF with containing the virus in the Dark Zone and regaining control of the city. Shortly after they were activated, the JTF and government pulled out of the Dark Zone, leaving the first wave and thousands of infected to fend for themselves. This eventually led to the uprising of Keener and his group of rogues. After this, the second wave was released. Unfortunately, most of them were destroyed before even setting foot in Manhattan. However, there was a contingency plan. The SHD had an alternate plan for if things went wrong with the division. A third wave. The division agents in New York City were lost. Most had either died or gone rogue, and the ones that had managed to avoid Keener and his crew were privy to far too much information around the SHD and the government's failures at executing the plan. The third wave was comprised of a special task force who was equipped to take down the division agents, bearing any evidence of what had happened. Alternatively, the third wave wasn't SHD at all. They are still a US government task force, but have been purposely kept separate from the SHD due to what they were intended for. Rather than a civilian agency, the hunters are from a military agency. They have been trained in the existence of the SHD and have been given similar tech to use, with features that overpower what the division agents have been given. Still to be used as a method of cleaning up loose ends, however this group is only given the information that the agents have turned against their country and need to be eliminated. The hunters being the third wave was my preferred theory 12 months ago, but given what we've seen with the introduction of the Division 2, it doesn't quite fit as well as it used to. Instead of being part of the SHD themselves, it would make more sense if these were a different government agency altogether. The division agents are privy to a lot of classified information, including the existence of the SHD in the first place. They've seen how the government has handled things, rightly and wrongly. The idea that the hunters were sent in to remove the division because they went rogue might not necessarily be true. Maybe it was the plan all along. After my video on how are division agents chosen, a lot of people asked the obvious question of, but what happens to these agents when they return back to normal life? Are they then allowed to explain everything they've been a part of? What I'm suggesting is that maybe they were never meant to return to normal life. Maybe they were to be cleaned up after the job was done. And being that it's a separate military branch of the government, the SHD command had no idea of this. So a separate, hidden military unit is sent in to wipe them out, making it look like they were simply killed in the line of duty by one of the many hostile factions around. They aren't given any information around the targets, just that they needed to be eliminated. The reason they've shown up in New York well before the agents completed their mission may have been because of the rogue agents and the deviation from the overall plan. Or maybe it has something to do with the constantly shifting power within the White House. We know that a large number of top government personnel were evacuated from DC. We know that a number of government personnel were killed when Air Force One was shot out of the sky. We also know that we're onto our third president since the outbreak, mostly due to internal struggles and outside influences from the mysterious organization that has employed the Black Tusk. So what if the leading force behind the Hunter Agency was killed during this time? Sure, there could have been someone else to step into their shoes, but what if they were also taken out? There wouldn't have been a huge number of people that were knowledgeable of the Hunter's existence. Far less than even the SHD, especially given their purpose. Or maybe the command has now been infiltrated by the same organization that turned on President Ellis. So the Hunters followed the distress call to Washington DC, where they have lost communications with their command, and are now facing a new enemy that seems to be functioning from the same level at which they had received their orders. The Hunters we're seeing in DC were just the remaining of what was activated in New York. No other Hunters have been activated since. It's possible that they are aware of the issues that are happening within the leadership of the country, and they are simply waiting to find out what their new orders are. Now I'm going to really put on my tinfoil hat. Maybe Aaron Keener already knows of all of this. Maybe he found out what was in store for the division agents once they've completed their missions. It could go even deeper than that, like the real people and purpose behind the original outbreak. There is the very slight possibility that Aaron Keener is actually the hero we all need, but don't deserve. But this is probably a theory of mine better suited to another video. Maybe I'll talk about that a bit later on. So there you have it. These are my thoughts on the current theories floating around, plus a few additions of my own. All of these can be picked apart in one way or another, but based on the little information we have, each of them are completely possible. I've tried to pack in as many ideas as I could under each theory. Most of them out there are just adaptations of these 6 different speculations. For example, I think I covered about 5 or 6 in the third wave section. A part of me actually hopes that the Hunter's backstory never gets revealed. We've built up so much hype around them that their actual origins will likely disappoint. Plus, it's the mystery around them that really sets them apart. Even if you disagree with every single theory here, at the very least I hope I've opened up your mind to the large number of possibilities around not just the Hunters, but some of the other mysteries within the division. Before I go, I really must thank Dranius for all of the help he gave me with this video. You can find him in our Discord. but also Abrax and Little Cooks from Not The In Gaming for a lot of the in-game footage. Part of it was from early on when we first found out you could activate the hunters. We didn't really have any gear, and they ended up chasing us all the way into the safe house, where they decided to hang out for a little while. Anyway, both of their channels will be listed in the description. If you get a chance, please jump in and chuck some NGN love their way. In fact, let's see if we can spam one of their videos. If you enjoyed this and like this sort of video or theory crafting, please let me know. I had a lot of fun putting this one together. Thanks for watching, guys. Cheers!
Calling all agents. We have an inbound blizzard warning. We have to get the cure and get out before the storm hits.
Come on, move it! We don't have much time!